News!
Contractually with someone like Dubois as well. I know we spoke about her. Like, she's still
listen. It's up to. We're at a situation now where we have to make decisions on who we can really invest in, who's going to sell the tickets, who's going to perform, who's going to do the big viewing numbers, viewing figures, and that's where we probably we have to make decisions.
It's a very roundabout way of saying, no, Carolyn may not be under contract with Boxer anymore, and they may not be able to afford believing in her, keeping her.
Invest.
It's a very roundabout way of saying that she doesn't yet sell tickets, she doesn't yet do the big numbers, so you have to mitigate whether or not you even want to invest, not just based on your circumstances, but her demands and whatever they are. It sounds a lot like you can't afford to play the game the way that you've been playing it.
You can't afford her. So I've no doubts that right now, Carolyn may be having conversations with MVP. She may be having conversations with Matchroom.
What I've not liked about Carolyn so far is that she walks around like she owns the place when Ben is basically saying, you don't do big numbers, you don't do big ticket sales, talking shit about Terry Harper, putting off the fight with Beatrice Ferreira, all while walking around like she owns the place.
It's ridiculous.
So now she has to decide where she wants to go. If she goes to MVP, Terry Harper is there, Stephanie Hahn, Holly Holm is there, Alicia Baumgartner, that's a major fight for down the line.
All right there at MVP. And going to MVP would not bar Carolyn Dubois from unifying titles with Beatrice Ferreira. Matchroom would be happy to send her over so long as Carolyn wants to fight, making MVP the best choice.
Second best would have to be Matchroom, that do shows all around the world, the United Kingdom included, where Carolyn has been based out of. They don't have as many options for Carolyn as MVP though, do they? Outside of the Beatrice Ferreira unification match, there are not a whole lot of bodies over there, but they can keep Carolyn active, they can keep her busy.
Busier at least than Boxer can. Carolyn hasn't fought since March.
Could be a situation to where Carolyn may have offers on the table that Boxer can't match. They have to look at her development so far and ask themselves, is it worth it to keep investing in her, or do they just cut her loose?
But that in and of itself is indicative of Carolyn's lack of marquee value, that in spite of her highfalutin attitude, you ain't the boss hog yet. You are not yet in a place where Terry Harper was supposed to just bend over backwards and do as you say.
This also highlights the scenario I painted upon hearing the news that Sky Sports would not renew with Boxer, that some of those contracts required fighters to box on that platform. And if Sky doesn't renew, those contracts could be void, and those fighters free to leave. So this seems to apply to Carolyn. Might it also apply to Lauren Price, Kara Sardingstall?
Because they haven't fought in a while either. We haven't seen them in a while.
The great exodus I described many months ago. You've already seen it. Joshua Buatsi and Lawrence Okoli left Boxer for Queensbury. Ben Whitaker left Boxer for Matchroom.
Savannah Marshall left Boxer for MVP.
So will Carolyn, Lauren, and Karis be joining her? Stable's thinning out. Boxer no longer has the resources to hang on to some of these fighters, and now they're just fighting to keep their heads above water.
We could be looking at the beginning of the end for Boxer, the disillusion of their existing stable as more and more fighters jump ship.
And now it's time for another installment of what is fast becoming the most popular segment here on the channel, Ring IQ Hate Mail, regarding that story that Saudi Arabia's PIF fund is depleted.
That they have run out of money, and my skepticism as to whether or not that story is true, since the story in and of itself is a trust me bro kind of story. That some journalists spoke to 11 people who are supposedly in the know, but none of which he can mention by name, and thus hampering the credibility of the story. That was my take on it. To that, SVGS650R said, all you saps are worried about the piece of shit Saudi prince and his money, but are apparently just fine with all the Saudis' civil rights violations, including slavery, torture, and murder.
Me tell you something, Sally Struthers. Nobody's worried about the Saudi prince and his money. It's just another subject like many subjects that we cover here on this channel. You're the only one in that entire comment section who got in his tits about it with all of your moral authority.
Virtue signaling.
For all of this hullabaloo about human rights violations in Saudi Arabia, have you actually boycotted any of the fights that they've put on? Or did you watch those fights alongside everybody else?
Because if you did, then you should shut the fuck up.
Mr. Social Justice Warrior, the only difference between me and you is I don't pretend to care what they're doing over there in Saudi Arabia.
Like you do.
I don't pretend to be worried about it. It's their land, their country, and within their own borders, they can do as they wish. That's the way the world works. And if you don't like it, then go find another one to live on.
Go find one.
But when I hear these would-be bleeding hearts harping about human rights violations in Saudi Arabia, that's an accusation you can make about almost any civilized country on the map. What you say about Saudi, you could say about the United Kingdom. You could say about the United States. And some people do.
Some people right here in this country who don't like the ICE operations and clearing out illegal immigrants. Some people who don't like the United States' connection to Israel and what they say Israel is doing to Gaza.
Stating that the United States is complicit with genocide as a result. Anything you can say about the Saudis, you can say about the United States. To some degree, you could say about the United Kingdom. So while you're standing on the pulpit,
you should probably reflect on that.
Your own sense of morality is but one perspective among many, many perspectives, and it doesn't empower you to castigate anybody else for how they do things. You don't like the Saudis? Don't fucking go over there.
Simple as.
You don't like content creators talking about the Saudi investment fund and what's going on with them? Then don't watch those fucking videos. You're the dickless prick that came here.
Dumbass.
This isn't even one of the bigger boxing channels. You would have had to come here of your own volition. You would have had to search out these videos in order to watch them so that you can then complain?
Fuck off, why don't you?
Or is it that you don't like that I don't believe the story? That I don't believe for a second the Saudis have run out of money? Either way, princess, if there are so many elements to this story and how it's covered that you don't like, then stop looking for videos to watch about it.
Because you came here.
Nobody dragged you out of your bed and dragged you out of your house and sat you in front of a laptop and made you watch this video. You chose to do that, now you're crying about it.
Because you're a fucking jackass.
Elsewhere in the hate mail bag, a guy who goes by the name Sebastian Smarth didn't like my coverage of the Yanni Bekele doping case for a scenario that I entertained.
Now bear in mind that I entertained 3 separate scenarios, all different with their own nuances. But he chose to cherry pick one because I guess he's butthurt. He said, wow, making a case for Yanni Beck being set up but not Ryan Garcia, shaking my head, man, you are biased. To which I responded, well, Ryan was tested by both VADA and the New York State Athletic Commission, and both samples came back with Osterin, so you explain it, champ.
Which he didn't, because he can't. A couple of days ago, Ryan Garcia told streamer Neon that VADA set him up, that his samples were tampered with in transit.
If you want to believe that, go ahead.
All I'm wondering is, if what you're telling Neon is that VADA sabotaged your samples, why did the New York State Athletic Commission sample also have Osterin in it when it was separate from the others?
Or did Sebastian not know that? Did he not realize it?
That VADA collected one set of samples and one set of samples was in their care, but another sample was in the keeping of the New York State Athletic Commission. And all of them had Osterin in them. 60 times above the legal threshold in New York State.
So are you seriously arguing Ryan Garcia's innocence to me?
Haven't you seen how many times his story has changed? First it was the Haney's and snack that set him up. Then it was that his supplements were tainted. Now it's that VADA tampered with his samples in transit.
So then which one is it?
He tried to blame the supplement manufacturer, NutraBio, saying that the Osterin came from the supplements. Well, after that, he tells Neon that VADA tampered with his samples in transit from point A to point B. Well, it can't be both. You believe the guy whose story changes that much?
You believe that VADA set him up. Okay, then I will ask you again. If VADA tampered with his samples in transit, why'd the New York State Athletic Commission sample have Osterin in it too? That one was separate from the others.
They all came back the same. See, the problem with guys like this is they don't have the hierarchy of thought to look at things on a case-by-case basis, taking into account all the particulars and all the nuances.
Guys like this are too simple for that. Simpletons, essentially. And they're looking for a one-size-fits-all answer to every situation. Speaking out of context and not being well-informed enough to formulate a cohesive opinion, or worse.
You're the one that's biased. You're the one who's still trying to die on a hill over Ryan Garcia's would-be innocence when it's so obvious that he's guilty.
You just don't want to believe it. Why you don't want to believe it? I don't fucking care.
But that would make you the biased one, so that when you call me biased, you're just projecting your own inadequacies onto me. It's very obvious to anyone and everyone with two functioning brain cells that Ryan Garcia deliberately cheated because his story keeps changing.
And even if you want to believe that he was set up by VADA, that doesn't explain why the New York State Athletic Commission's sample also had Osterin in it. Or are we to believe that the state of New York also set this guy up?
Why the fuck would they want to do that?
Somebody should ask Sebastian. Maybe he can explain it.
He did not comply with the rules. Then he moves up to super middle and makes the fight of the century, beats Canelo, makes $50 million or around that. The WBC absolutely is not going to charge 3% of such an amount. We made a very clear 0.6%, which is $300,000, with $225,000 going to the Jose Sulaiman Boxers Fund, which is to help former fighters in need. And it is just regrettable. Not even a thank you or I'm sorry, taking a different route, no response. I wish him the best. But this is not. The WBC is huge, it's great, it's about greatness, and I'm relieved, to tell you the truth.
Now, there is actually a legitimate reason that Terence Crawford may have held off on paying the sanctioning fees for one or some of the belts that he fought Canelo Alvarez for. He likely went into that fight with Canelo knowing that even if he wins, he's not staying at 168. So what are you going to kick out hundreds of thousands of dollars for belts that you're not going to hang on to, you're not going to defend? What would be the point?
It's a legitimate reason.
But the money-hungry WBC doesn't see it that way. They wish to continue to profiteer from these fighters' purses, skimming their little bit off the top, because that's what they're doing, and that's what this is about.
An official quote from Mauricio Sulaiman stated, he forgot how he got to make $50 million.
Accenting what I tell you about Mauricio all the time. This is a sanctioning body president who fancies himself a promoter. No sanctioning body president, more than Mauricio Sulaiman, likes to stand center stage.
Nobody likes to do that more than him. He forgot how he got to make $50 million, as if to say that the only reason Terence got that money was because your belt was on the line?
You gotta be fucking joking.
It was not the World Boxing Council that kicked out the $50 million to Terence Crawford and paid Canelo whatever they paid him. That was Turkey LL Sheik. And those dollar amounts likely would have been on the line, WBC title or no WBC title. Terence didn't make that money because of anything you did.
The fucking nerve of this guy.
Ingratiating himself for the massive sum of cash that Terence Crawford was able to make through his own ability, his own efforts, and his own willingness to take on Canelo Alvarez. That's what got him that money, not you.
To then start moaning about how he didn't thank you guys? What the fuck was he supposed to be thanking you for? You're not the ones that got him the Canelo Alvarez fight. You're not the ones paying for anything. So what the fuck is he supposed to be thanking you for?
Saying that the 300 Lodge would go to the Jose Sulaiman Fund, a fund that helps boxers in need. Except that I don't actually believe that.
And that I'm just taking on common sense, because nothing about how the WBC operates tells the story of a non-profit.
And it is just regrettable. Not even a thank you or I'm sorry, taking a different route, no response. I wish him the best. But this is not. The WBC is huge, it's great, it's about greatness, and I'm relieved, to tell you the truth.
Relieved, he says. He says that he's relieved. Why would he say that?
Because he would rather that somebody else hold that WBC title.
It was veteran content creator Two-Tone the Superstar who said it best. Canelo had the WBC eating good for almost 5 years. Bud becomes undisputed, and suddenly the direct deposits stopped hitting. WBC looked at their bank app like, hold up, we've been stripped?
As stated, the WBC would prefer that someone other than Terence Crawford hold their alphabet title. Somebody who's going to be more of a team player.
Somebody who's going to give them cuddles, turn them over, and rub their belly.
Somebody who's going to play ball.
In case you haven't noticed, the WBC are very choosy about who they want their champions to be. They don't treat everybody the same across the board. Even though they're supposed to. I mean, that's the function that they are intended to perform, to move their ranks along and ensure that every fighter in those ranks, popular or otherwise, gets their crack at the apple so long as they earn it. But that's not what they do. Which is why I've long pushed against the notion that the World Boxing Council is in any way more prestigious than the other three alphabet organizations when it's neither the oldest alphabet organization or the most well-run. There's nothing prestigious.
There's nothing that substantiates the claim that the World Boxing Council is in any way better than the other three alphabet organizations.
Now, this wouldn't be such a big story if not for how Mauricio Sulaiman presented it, because he presented it in such a way as to shade Terence Crawford. We all knew beforehand that win or lose, Terence ain't staying at 168, so him dropping those alphabet titles was an eventuality.
That was always going to happen.
But when you try to put him on blast with your megaphone for not paying sanctioning fees for a belt that he wasn't going to keep anyway, saying that you're relieved now that he doesn't have it.
Those are jabs.
And when you say that he must have forgot how he got the 50 million, that's another jab.
I think that Mauricio chose to be less than gracious about it because he was banking on getting sanctioning fees from both Canelo and Crawford. Canelo would have had to pay them because he was the champion going in, but Terence
was the challenger, and after the fight, since he doesn't plan on staying at that weight, what is he going to give you guys $300,000 for? You act like that's not a lot of money.
Compared to the $50 million that he made, it may seem like a small amount, but all of that money is his money.
You're not entitled to it, and so as a result of this, Hamza Shiraz and Christian Mabili are now said to be fighting for the newly vacated WBC title, which I'm not against, and we will discuss in another video. Though now what I'm left wondering is, if Terence Crawford continues to fight on and moves down to the middleweight division and fights one of the guys that are there, is he gonna hold off on fighting for the WBC title on the premise of how Mauricio chose to handle this? Because he didn't have to do things this way.
Is Terence gonna hold off on fighting for any version of a WBC title on the premise that he doesn't want to give those guys 1 red cent of his money?
Just something to think about on the heels of Mauricio's recent comments that really make the story what it is. Terence was never going to hang on to any of those belts. He was always going to drop them. You're just having a bitch fit about it because he didn't pay you your tribute. And that's really what the story is.